Now, finally, after what, 9 weeks, 8 weeks, the fun starts. At least in my mind, this is the fun part of this class, and that's starting to extract data out of the databases. Designing databases, that's always fun, if you like that kind of stuff. Building tables, filling it with data, those are skills you'll need, particularly the insert command that you learned. That's a skill you'll learn to use, or you'll have to use in Programming Logic Intermediate, Web Data Management. You have to understand the insert command and how it works, what it does. Any questions about any of those that kind of popped up while you're doing your homework? Okay. Now what we're going to start today is single table queries. Remember, a query, also known as a view, allows you to get data back out of a database. To ask questions. A query is a question. Give me a list of all the customers who ordered in February. Give me a list of all the customers who ordered this product because there's a recall. Give me a list of whatever, all the employees who went on a trip to New York in February when it was snowing. I don't know about the snowing part, but the February part. The snowing part I can't answer because the database, you'll see here in a little bit, the database does not contain any weather information. If the data is not in your database, then you can't ask questions about it. But if the data is in there anywhere, you can. In this unit, we're going to focus on getting data out of one single table, just to get warmed up. The real power comes when we can start combining data in related tables to answer questions. That's next unit, the multi-table query. So we're going to start with the simple stuff, relatively simple, and then we'll get into the more complicated queries in the next unit. And then you'll have, by that time, when we get done with the next unit, the multi-table unit, you'll have the skills really to extract any data from any database, although sometimes it can be a challenge. Lots of good information in your book. So if you haven't read that over and you're inclined, feel free to read. Not a whole lot of pages that we're going to refer to there, about 97. Looks like the big page here is 128. So 20, 30 pages, not too bad. You can read those over. Most of it's in my notes, and I'll have to admit that my notes are a little more current. Things have changed in SQL, especially in MySQL. This book is a bit dated. This is the last time. I don't plan to recommend to the new instructor that they use this book. Either find a new one or skip it altogether because things keep changing. One of the reasons we can skip it all together is MySQL is open source, so at the dev MySQL.com site there is a documentation subset of that website. Very, very thorough, though of course with thorough comes complex, hard to decipher sometimes. I hope my notes and these lectures get you through what you need basically, but if you need much, and there's a whole lot more to MySQL that I'm going to teach you. MySQL has the ability to do if statements, switch statements, loops, all that kind of stuff. It's pretty much a programming language all its own. It's a little beyond what we have time to cover in this class. And those are things I don't very often use. I think I've used a switch statement once in SQL that I've written. And an if statement I've never used because I needed a switch statement, but pretty rare. I've not used loops. I can usually get done what I need to get done simply by writing single or multi-table queries. The basic query we've already seen. It's a select star from table name. We use that into Create Tables Lab and the Create Tables assignment to check to see if the records that you inserted into the tables were there. That's the basic command. This says, give me every single field. The star, after the select part of the command, comes a field list. Which fields do you want to see? You don't have to see them all. We're going to see how to do that here in just a little bit. But the star says, give me everything. There's no where clause here. We'll learn about the where clause soon. The where clause says, but only these records. There is no where clause, so this says, give me every single field, every single record, basically everything you got in that table. Very handy for checking your inserts to make sure they work and also to get a feel for what kind of data is in the database if you have an existing table. Speaking of existing tables, let's do that next. On the OneDrive site, for those of you who just came in, on the OneDrive site, there is an import employees SQL file. Download that to your desktop or some convenient location. Once you've downloaded it, open the workbench. Don't forget to start XAMPP and to start MySQL, because we're going to need the database. Should be doing that every time you come in from now on if you want to follow along. If you're just watching, obviously it doesn't make much difference. But if you want to follow along, your first goal is to get here 5 minutes before class, because this takes a little time. Get logged in, launch XAMPP, start the MySQL, and then launch the MySQL workbench. That'll get you ready. We don't have the database that we're going to use in class yet, so we're going to import that. That's what's in that file that I just had you download. To bring that file in, you click the little Open SQL icon up here on the toolbar and find that employees import file that you downloaded. I put it on the desktop because it makes it easy to find. Find that file and just open it. And you can scroll through this. Some of this should look pretty familiar, like create database, like use employees. By the way, if you already have a database called employees over here, because you imported it before, it's probably okay, but just to be safe, I would delete it, right click and remove the schema or drop it, and then just use this new one. I create a table with ID numbers, I insert data, and then look at all these commands. You're welcome. Right? That's a lot of data that you would have had to type, and it would have to be 100% accurate, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Even includes, and this one could be valuable for future projects, a states table that has state abbreviations, state names, and whether it's a United States state or a territory or a Canadian province. We won't use that one much, but we'll bring it in just to show it to you. This is called an SQL procedure because it has a bunch of commands. It's like a little mini SQL program. Create a database, create tables, insert data, create some more tables, insert some more data, etc. All of it pre-saved. It's kind of like a recorded little mini SQL section. To run it, click the regular lightning bolt, not the one with the placeholder here. We click the regular lightning bolt and it will execute every one of these commands. You should see a bunch of green check marks down at the bottom of your screen, and after it's done grinding, the last one you should see is, mine says 433 commands, it might be 432. As long as you got green check marks on all of this, you've now imported basically all of that data, all of the tables, the relationships automatically come with it, all of the data has now been imported. Of course, it doesn't appear over here because we inserted, so we need to refresh. And there's the employees table. Let's take a quick look through the structure of that database. You can close this window if you wish. If you mangle this, you can just drop the employee database and re-import it. You saw how simple that was. Let's take a look at the employees. Here's the tables. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 tables. I'm not sure how much we're going to do with states, but there's a list of employees. Let's see what's in there. So up here in my command line, I'll make this bigger in a second. I'm going to say select star from TBL employees, semicolon, make it bigger, and remember Control Enter to execute. This is handy because we get to look around a little bit, see what's inside the table, see how data is stored. You as a GUI programmer, as a business class programmer, as a database developer need to know what the data looks like. ID numbers are not auto number here. Looks like they're 8-digit or 9-digit ID numbers, similar to Social Security numbers. It's the one thing about this database I chose not to change. First names, last names, genders are single letters, important to know, so we're not searching for female, because if you search that field for female, you won't find anybody. And it'll look like there's no females working in these companies. So you have to know that it's abbreviated. Plant IDs. Which plant is that? I don't know. Plant number 3, and that is an auto number field. I know because I built the database. It is an auto number field. Which one's number 3? I don't know. Now I could go find out, right? In the next unit, multi-table queries will link the tables together. That's simply a linking field that points to the child table or the parent table, excuse me, and said, which plant is that? This is very common. You'll see this all over the place in the database. Very common to have these numbers that don't mean anything, even to us. But once we get past the multi-table queries part, that won't matter. Phone numbers are stored without dashes. Good to know. On the GUI side, we'd have to insert our dashes. We're not doing GUI here. We're being database developers and database inspectors. We're going inside the database. I don't need my data to be formatted usually. I just want to see it. But this is also important when you're searching. I'm searching for a phone number that contains this area code, or I'm looking for a phone number that is exactly this. Don't search with parentheses, spaces, or dashes, because they're not in there. Hire dates, they are dates. Salaries look like numbers. Union, that the ones and zeros are your clue that this is a Boolean field, a tiny bit, or a tiny int, but basically a Boolean field. So there's the employees table. There's also a plants table. Let's take a look in there. Select star from TBL plants. There's my plants. Before I was asking which one is plant number 3. Now I can see it's the Richmond, Virginia plant that is run by Alice Compton. Phone numbers and dates. But that's an auto number field, pretty obvious because they're going sequential. At any time, I own this database now. I can look, I can do a describe plants. And see that it's an auto number field. If I'm not positive, I can always go look. Same command that you learned in the last unit. But now what you're seeing here is that the importance of knowing the structure, yes, that's helpful, but sometimes you need to know the format of the data. Male, female is one character instead of the full word. That kind of stuff is important to know. Let's continue with our tour. In addition to plants, we also have trips. So employees take business trips, TBL trips. You guys are so lucky. I finally modified this database. When I first got it in the employee table, the employee ID was called employee ID. And here it was called emp ID. And that caused so much grief for everybody, I finally decided it's time to change it. Part of it was not every database has consistent field name standards all the way across. And some of you saw in your database build assignment that sometimes you can't. I mean, the supervisor ID and employee ID both mean the same thing. They can have different names. And we can still link them together, even though they have different names in different tables. It's just confusing. So I took it out. Again, dates, where did we go? This is how many days and how much money did we spend. I think the states table is just there for convenience. Let's just take a quick look at it. We already kind of saw a peek at it. Might come in very handy someday if that's what you need. Notice there's no auto number field here. The state code itself or the state abbreviation itself is used as the primary key because they should be unique, as should the state name. But not every table needs to have an auto number field. Remember, our employee table doesn't either. But I believe the trip table did, didn't it? Each trip has an ID. Nope. Whoa. So what are the keys there? Well, I'm going to describe TBL trips. I'm just reusing commands up here so I don't have to type too much. Dual keys, the employee ID and the trip date. So in order for this database, it's going to check to make sure that I never have the same employee going on a trip on the same date to two places on the same day. Is that reasonable? Maybe not. But that's our current rule. Questions about the general layout, about the basic select command? We're going to spend a lot of time in this table, these tables, for our practice in class, but you're not going to use them for the homework assignment. And that's what those other files were for. These, again, for the recording, the book databases 2015 has your Henry Books, Premier Products, Alexamar Marina databases pre-built. Import them just like we just did. You'll have to do all three one at a time because I don't put them in the same file. It's even huge, more huge, difficult to maintain. But they're all there. And they should match the structure of what you did in Database Design 1 and 2. My advice to you when you're doing the homework, those lovely ERDs that you're drawing for Henry Books and Alexa Marina and Premier Products, keep those nearby until you're really comfortable with the databases and who's connected to what where. Data Dictionary wouldn't be too bad, but if I want to know about the fields, I usually do one of these select stars and it shows me all the fields. But the tables and how they're connected, that entity relationship diagram can really come in handy. So my advice is just print that, stick it into a convenient document someplace so you can see it on the screen however you want to function. And use it until you're very comfortable with who's connected to who. And you might not get there in this class because you don't get to use them that much. My students in systems, I should go look, see how many tables they have. I think it's in the neighborhood of 30 for that Lions Camp data, higher than that, Reen says. 30 tables, they've got the ERD handy at all times. Who's connected to what, where, and how do I get there? ERD to me is the most valuable tool. And how are they linked? That's also important. We'll see that when we start putting tables together in the multi-table databases in the next unit. All right, so much for our tour. I'm not going to save any of these commands. Actually, they're all in the recording if you want to see them. Each command itself is a one-time use thing. I hope my notes are your primary reference, but the recording can help if you can't sort through the notes. So we did this basic query. But what if I don't want to see all of the fields? Then, in your select clause, you don't put a star. You list the fields that you want to see. So let's go to the employee table and only show the first name, last name, plant ID, and union status. Again, we still use a select. But instead of a star, we list the fields in the order that you want to see them. Let me just flip it around for curiosity's sake. Let's start with the union member status. MySQL is not case sensitive, so whether you capitalize the M in member or not is up to you. I don't even ding you for it when you're doing the homework assignment. Oh my gosh, you didn't follow the camel case rules. When we're doing these kinds of commands in the SQL workbench, they're not case sensitive. However, when you start writing programs, PHP access, ASP access to a database, then the case of the field names is important. And you have to follow the rules. So when Reen is typing commands in PHP to access data in a database, his field names have to be capitalized properly. Otherwise, it may not find them. And that's why when you build the tables, I'm looking very carefully, are you using camel case? Because when you write code or somebody else writes code against your tables, they're going to expect the fields to be capitalized in a certain way. But when we type our SQL commands here, it really doesn't matter. Then in addition to the union member, I'm using commas to separate these. I want to see the first name, the last name, and the plant ID. Don't do what is now called the Lyle mistake and put a comma after the last one.
Thank you.
You're welcome. It's named after you. Most people are real thrilled about that. You know, I'd love to have a programming technique named after me. It hasn't happened yet, but this is named after you. It's on the recording. You can sell it to your friends. You just keep going. So if you want 16 fields, you just keep, if there's that many in the database or in the table, excuse me, you just keep going. In the next unit, when we do multi-tables, we'll have a longer list of fields here because we'll learn how to pull fields from multiple tables. We'll save that for later. If you have room, you may continue with the from clause. We still have to designate where this comes from. Some students prefer to move each clause onto a separate line. Perfectly fine. From TBL employees. The semicolon is optional, but it does, when you're using the workbench, separate one command from another, so when you execute them, it doesn't try to do two of them at once. So I recommend semicolons at the end of all your commands. I just control enter on all of these. If you're wondering how I'm getting them to run, I control enter, or you can click on the little lightning bolt with the placeholder, the cursor in it, that basically says execute the command with the cursor in it. It does the same thing. And now I get the same information from my employee tables, but I don't have all the information here. I don't have their phone numbers, their supervisor IDs, or whatever else is in here. I just have the first names, where they work, and whether or not they're a union member. When you do the star, you get the fields, all of them in the order that they're listed in the database when you use the create statement. That's how they're defined. If you want things in different orders, here's how you do it. Just list the fields. When you're doing the homework assignments, I'm going to be asking you to list certain fields. I will be designating them in a certain order. You must match the order just to prove that you can put them in whatever order you're told to. That's one of the competencies, list fields in a different order than they are in the database. So follow the order that I give them to you in the assignments. Questions on limiting the field list? Okay. The next thing we typically want to do is only select certain records. We just now limited the fields. I only want to see this minimal field list. But so far, when we've done that, we've still gotten all of the records. If I come back over here, I forget, I think there's 50 employees. Down at the bottom, it told me that 50 rows were returned. So I got every single employee. But what if I only want to see the employees who are in Coloma, and for this unit, I have to know the ID number. Pretty sure I give them to you in all the assignments. I need to know the plant ID number. How would I know that Coloma's plant number 1? Well, there's only 4. And if I've been working here for more than about a couple of months, I probably know the ID numbers of those 4 plants. And honestly, after Unit 2, you won't care. You won't need it. But to simplify these queries, I'm giving you the ID numbers. To limit the number of fields, we still use a select clause, and you can still put fields here, or you can put a star there. That doesn't change. You can still put the star there, and then we add a where condition. The where condition creates a criteria, or a condition, a criteria, similar to what we're doing in programming with an if statement. Where something is equal to this, where something is greater than that, where some field, normally we're talking about fields. And here are the operators we can use. We can use an equality operator. Before we talk about the rest of these, let's do a quick example, because this says up here, show me only the people who live in Coloma or who work in Coloma. I'm just going to continue this query and add a new clause to it. These are called clauses in SQL. Just kind of little parts of the sentence that we're creating here, where the plant ID is equal to, not double equal to. I don't think it, let me try it. I don't think it works. I'm getting a squiggle. That's a pretty good sign it doesn't work here. In C#, in JavaScript, in PHP, in most of the languages you're going to use, a test for equality uses double equal to. Not here. Welcome to the pitfalls of syntax and programming. Every language, and this is another language, has its own syntax, and you have to learn them and somehow keep them all straight. If we now run this query again, we've got a much smaller list, and notice that all the plant IDs are 1. I've filtered my list of records, my list of employees. to only show the ones that meet my criteria. This time I got 12 rows. We can easily change that. Let's take a look at plant number 3, whoever the heck that is. And notice now we get a different group of people. So now back to the notes. In addition to checking for equality, which is very common, okay, we can check for less than, greater than, less than or equal to, greater than or equal to, stuff that you've seen before. You've seen not equal to in C#. In other languages, the less than, greater than, right next to each other, that looks like a diamond. It's not. Those are 2 characters, the less than sign and the equal to sign right next to each other. That also represents not equal to. So you can use these 2 interchangeably, either one. So let's go back to our query and do where the plant is not equal to 3. For some reason, I lean toward that one. The primary reason is my Visual Basic days. That's the not equal to operator in Visual Basic, even visualbasic.net. And so it's still my first choice for not equal to, but the other one works. If we run this, notice all the 3s are gone. I got 1s, 2s, and 4s. And just to prove that they don't make any difference, use the one that you're most comfortable with, exclamation mark, equal sign. That's the C#, JavaScript, etc. version. Should give you the exact same results. In addition to these operators, there is a between operator. Okay, and to test that one, I'm first, let's see if I have anything in here, display all the employees who were hired between 1997 and 2001. I hope my dates are still the same in the database. So now I'm going to change the criteria. The field name, I believe, is hire date. And I can use the between operator. Now Karen's going to be a stickler here because she's already done it to me in a couple of other places. Between in just about all, I have not found one yet, in all programming languages includes the endpoint. So when you say between 1 and 3, Karen would say grammatically that means 2, because 1 and 3 are not between 1 and 3. But all programming languages, the between operator includes the endpoints. So if I wanted to do, what was this, 1997 and 2000, I would put a date in here. And remember, dates are designated the same way you use them in your insert command in ISO format. So 1997-0101. You can put quotes around that, double quotes or single quotes, either one. The between operator always comes with an and. 2001, 12, 31, done. You can use between for any type of data. You can say, give me the people between Schmitz and Schuck. And they will find alphabetically everybody who's in between those. You can say, give me people whose salary is between 50,000 and 60,000. So you can use numbers. And you can use dates. Very powerful operator for SQL queries. Does it work? According to my notes, 17 rows, and that's what I showed down at the bottom. Notice I got a criteria. This is rare. I have a criteria, and the field isn't even included in the list. There's no rule that says it has to be. Might be a little easier to check the results of my query if I included the hire date up here in the field list. Just added a comma, added hire date, run it again, and there's my hire date, 97, 98, 2001s are included, 97s are included, that's a pretty good sign. Here's a 97-0108. Doesn't look like I have any 97-0101. If I really wanted to test this thoroughly, I should have a piece of data somewhere that is 1997-0101. Excuse me. And another one is 1996-1231, just to make sure. If I were the database developer here, that's what I would be testing with. But that seems to work. Questions? Didn't work?
Oh, it works, but I have table employees 10. Everybody else has 14. Where it says table employees.
Here?
No, at the bottom
Oh,
of
here.
your list. Up a little high. Where you're
Oh,
right there.
this 14 is just the number of query that you've entered. It's a useless number. Don't worry about it. But thanks for pointing it out. This 14 says I have executed 14 queries. Every time you execute it, that one just goes up by one. So you're behind because you only done 10. What's the problem? No. That number, it confused me too. I thought it would give me the row number, the number of returns. That would be nice.
I checked and counted them all, and I'm like,
Yeah. This is where you find the number of rows that were returned down here. And I agree with you. This number is useless. Why do they put it there? I think, can we go back or close it? I don't even remember.
it's to show that.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a where clause. When you're doing text comparison, make sure you use apostrophes. When you're using dates, either use this format like we just did, or remember you can also do this. You can specify dates without dashes. I think they're kind of hard to read. This one is that an 11 or is that that's getting a little hard to read. I like the dashes personally, but I get a lot of people who disagree with me. 17 rows, same results. So you can enter dates in either one of those two formats, you get the same results. Val?
How can we sort the dates shown so that we know what
Have patience getting there. It's coming. Okay. In C# and all your other programming languages, you can also use compound operators to have multiple conditions. Multiple conditions. Before I go there, I've realized that these two paragraphs are backwards. So let's do another query where we say, I want a list. I want to save that one. Nah. I want a list of union members. Well, union members is a Boolean field, so you could do something like this, where the union member equals, well, I'm looking at the list here, 1, right? That works. But you have a little more flexibility. You can also say true. Gives me the same answer. I don't think, let me check this. I might be thinking access. Yes doesn't probably work here. Nope. Notice I'm getting a syntax error because yes is unknown. Thinks it's a column name. My error message down here is a little cryptic. So that didn't work. Here's my preference. If you name the field properly, we talked about naming your flags properly in C#. If it's a Boolean field and you name it properly like union member, this reads well. Give me this data from the employees table where they're a union member. Remember, this is Boolean. It has true or false inside it. So if the union field has true in it, it will be included in the list. If it doesn't, it was not included in the list. You get the same result. In C#, if you wanted people who were not union members, you put an exclamation mark there. I'm honestly not sure if that'll work here. I don't know. Oh. But that's hard to read. Most people in SQL will do that. You can put the word not in front. Easier to read. Where they're not a union member, get the same results. So the exclamation mark works. They've been tweaking MySQL lately to make it kind of friendly, compatible with all of the programming languages out there. The word not is Visual Basic, and that's where they started. But there are so many curly bracket languages now that MySQL has added syntax so that you can use exclamation marks, exclamation mark equal signs, so that you can use your favorite syntax from your favorite language and it'll probably work here. So when you're using Boolean fields, the easiest way to deal with them, I'm going to take the not back out, is simply list the Boolean field name in the where clause. In the where clause. And at this point, since I've verified that my query works, isn't this field kind of redundant? I know they're all union members. Often you'll leave this out and trust that the answer is correct. But I don't usually do that until after I've verified that my query is correct. I'm going to put it back. Undo. Control Z puts it back. I'm just demonstrating that, again, you can include fields in your where clause that are not even listed up here in what you see in the results. They don't have to be. Be patient, Val. We're getting there. You can't stand it. Okay. Now, back to the compound conditions. If we want a compound condition, we can use the keyword and, the keyword or. You're a bunch of C# programmers, so double ampersands, double vertical bars. Those all work, and you just saw me use the keyword not. So if I wanted to have a list of union members who work in plant number 2, this is the way I usually do it, new line, and the next criteria, notice the and lines up so that my criteria line up. That's just my anal way of doing that. You can put at the end, just like in C#, all the blank lines, all the tabs, all the white space is basically ignored. I stack them on top of each other like this to make them more readable. When you submit to me, please stack like this. Because many of you, I think it's Lyle who has dual 24-inch monitors at home, so that gives him 48 inches across, and he could give me an SQL command that I'd have to scroll for 3 minutes to read it. What I'll do in that case is break it up, and after I've done that a couple of times, I'll get aggravated and start looking for flaws to mark wrong. Please. It just makes it a lot easier to read. Even in PHP, when we write these commands to execute programs, to execute these kinds of SQL commands, we break them up to make them easy to read and maintain. And the plant ID equals 2. So now, just like in C#, I have 2 criteria, just like in Access, just like in Excel, if you've taken the intermediate class there. I've specified 2 criteria. It's an AND condition. So this will give me everybody who meets both criteria. It should be a much filtered list. And I'm down to all union members, plant 2. And yes, you can chain these as many as you want, and. So we could put our and they were hired between these dates if we wanted to. Looks like most of these people were hired between those dates anyway, so that wouldn't do us much good. We can do an or. Here I'm going to do, give me a list of people who work in plant number 1, or let's make it 4, or plant number 2. This is one way to do this. In many cases, there are multiple ways to skin a cat to come up with the answer that we want in SQL. When you're doing your homework assignment, follow the instructions in the book. They will often say use an or operator to solve this problem. Use a subquery, which we haven't talked about, to solve this problem. There may be other, even more convenient ways. That's not the point. The point is to practice subqueries and see some of their value to demonstrate your skills or your ability to use compound operators. So follow the instructions in the book. If they don't give you any detailed instructions on how to solve this, then any solution works. Let's test that one real quick. And it said, nope, that's not right. Plant ID equals 2, plant ID equals 4. There we go, 4s and 2s. It's making Val absolutely crazy, and I'm starting to join her here. So let's sort. I'm going to jump ahead a little bit in the notes. It's very close behind here. Let's take a little break from filtering and talk about sorting. Sorting is its own clause, and in MySQL, in all versions of SQL, the order of the clauses is important. You must start with select in the field list. Then comes the table list. What tables are you using for this query? In this case, only one. Then comes the where criteria. Then comes the order by clause. Order by clause, you simply now list the fields that you want to sort by in the order that you want to sort them. So let's sort by union member. So in this case, we're going to get a list of all the employees who work in 2 or 4, and we're going to sort them by whether they're union members or not. Now all the zeros are together and all the ones are together, and Val can breathe a little easier. If we wish, we can further sort them. I'm going to add the plant ID to the beginning of this sorting. This says now sort them by plant ID first, so all the 2s are together and all the 4s are together. And if for all the 2s, sort them by union member. So this is, some people call it a tiebreaker, a secondary sort field. There's all kinds of names for these. Primary and secondary sort. We sort by this first. If there's a tie in plant ID, we break the tie using union members. So now all of the 2s are together. And it looks like everybody in plant 2 is a union member. That's interesting. And everybody, no, not everybody in plant, did I skip some? Oh, there he is. Okay. One supervisor in plant 2, poor guy. A girl, pardon me. Okay. Supervises all these people. That person ought to be asking for a raise. Either that or it's a smaller plant, because in plant 4, it takes 4 people to supervise those people. If you wish, you can reverse the sort order. I want the union members first. DESC is the syntax for descending. So this will sort the union members descending so that the 1s come before the 0s. If we were sorting by salary descending, the highest paid people get listed first, and then the lowest paid people. That's pretty much all there is to sorting. Okay, but now I've got 1s followed by 0s, 1s followed by 0s. And yes, but notice this descending only applies to that. If I want to see plant 4 first, it gets its own descending. So each field you can designate descending or ascending. There is an ASC, but you don't specify it because that's the default. If you do, you're a newbie. It works just fine, but you don't normally specify ascending. Better, Val? Okay. And you can, if I'm doing these examples and you can't stand it, sort by whatever you want. We can sort by name, we can sort by date, anything. And MySQL, like most programming languages, knows how to sort dates, ascending, descending, knows how to sort text, ascending, descending, alphabetizes, knows how to do all that. Wow, we would have had to wait a long time to get to that. Whew. It's a good thing we jumped ahead. But that's about all there is, right? Order by, and then field 1, field 2, field 3, field, you can sort by as many fields as you want. And there's some examples. Remember, if you're sorting by, that's a where clause, I'm sorry. Sorting by whatever order you want, the where clause comes first if you have both. Sometimes you sort without a where. Sometimes you have a where without a sort. You can mix them, but if you put them all in, they have to appear in this order. And that's about all there is to sorting. So let's go back to more criteria. We talked about Boolean fields or bit fields or tiny ints, whatever you want to call them. They all have basically the same name. You simply insert the field name, not. You can say these, but it's just rare. After you get more experience, and you should be starting to see it in your programming class as well, This is the most flexible. Another thing I changed is this union member field. This database that we're using, I used it many years ago in Access. It's an employee table that I built in Access. Access, in the Microsoft way, decides to store its true values as -1 instead of +1. No idea why. It's just Bill Gates being different than Steve Jobs, or this isn't even Steve Jobs. Doesn't matter. If we were using an Access database, we had imported the data, this wouldn't work because true values show up as -1, not +1. But this still works. The way most languages treat numbers when they see them, 0 is false. Everything else is true. -1 is true. 1 is true. As long as you don't use the equal sign. This would probably still work. I've changed the database again so that this is how MySQL stores its trues and falses. It stores trues as 1 and false as 0. But if you're trying to use SQL against an Access database, hint, hint, programming logic intermediate, right? Then you have a Boolean field and you try to do a query with this, it won't work. So this is probably the best way to query a Boolean field and say where this Boolean field has a 1 in it, has a true in it. That's the best way to do it.
You just put quotes around the 1.
Down here?
Yeah.
That means it's text. It'll work. Don't do that. All right, one of the things you'll discover is that MySQL is smarter than the average programmer. If you put quotes around your salaries, it'll work. If you say where salary is greater than 50,000 and you put quotes around it, it works. Don't do that. You are not leaving here putting quotes around numeric fields.
Well, if your data type for full-time was text.
Then you have to do it. And it still works if you forget, which just makes me crazy. And like I said, MySQL is smarter than the average programmer. You can put quotes around stuff that you don't need quotes around, it'll work fine. And not put quotes around stuff that you should, and sometimes it'll work. Dates, you have to be careful. If you want to compare against dates, you have to put quotes around them if there's dashes in there. If you leave the dashes out, but I want to make sure that you understand the difference between numeric data and text data and date data, and after programming logic beginning and intermediate, you ought to, and I want you to demonstrate that here. That you know it's a number, so don't put quotes around it. Some of you got caught in your insert commands putting quotes around numbers. They worked. You were happy. MySQL made you happy. And then I bummed you out. I said, that's not text. In the real world, do they care? I'm not sure, but I do. So I want you to keep your text and your dates and your numbers distinct. So when you're writing queries for me, don't put quotes around numeric fields. Now remember, a zip code for most of you is a text field. Even though it looks like a number, you should be putting quotes around it because it's a text field. Am I making it unnecessarily complicated? I don't think so. Everybody understand what I mean? If not, check with me later. Okay, so this is the best way to do Boolean fields. If you do the other ones and they work, I'll give you credit. But I'll probably also put a little red thing at the end saying you probably ought to change it. You don't need the double equals true. Or single equals true. You don't need a single equals false. Just say not full-time instead of full-time equals false. Particularly in MySQL, the word not in front makes these very readable and understandable. So let's tweak this real quick. Where plant ID equals 1 or 2, and oh boy, this gets interesting. Let's see what happens here. And they're a union member. Which means sorting by union members, since all we're getting is union members doesn't make any sense. Now, if I was in C sharp, I'd be a little concerned here because I'm mixing ands with ors. And which has precedence? In C sharp, the and has precedence. So what this really says is give me everybody who works in plant 4. In C sharp, this is what this really says. That's not what I meant, is it? I don't think that's not what I meant. I meant give me everybody who's in 2 and 4 and are union members, but that's not what that means if you don't, that's what it means. The and has precedence in C sharp. I'm not sure if it has precedence here. Let's find out. If the and has precedence, meaning it's going to do this part first, I'm going to get everybody from plant 4, whether they're union members or not. And then only the union members from plant 2 is what this says if and has precedence. I'm thinking that it doesn't, and my SQL just processes these in order. All right, shut up, find out. I got 9 union members from plant 4. I got 9 union members from plant 4, and I got only union members from plant 2. Just like C sharp, and has precedence. This is what it did. Give me anybody from plant 4. Or plant 2 members who are union members. So the and was only applied to those 2 together. Not what I wanted. So what I have to do, just like in any other language, is tell it, I don't care about your order of precedence. This is what I want. Give me that first, and then, so give me the list of 2s and 4s, and then strip out the non-union members. Now everybody is a union member. So again, there's consistency, thank goodness. And has precedence over or. And when you mix, where this is a problem is when you mix the 2. Then you have to be very careful. Look at your results. Make sure you're getting the result set. That's what this is called. Make sure you're getting the result set that you expect. When the 2 are combined, and you have a combination of ands and ors, as you just saw, you can have some unexpected results. I didn't expect any union members, but I got them.
Could you put in member after planet equals or in member?
Yes. A little longer, but here's what she's proposing. Because the ands have precedence, this gets done, then this gets done, then the 2 of them are ORed together. I have 21 rows in my result set right now. This should give me the same results. And it does. But no, it works, and I would mark it correct, and I would say, can you simplify it? But now we're getting into something called Boolean algebra. Ugh. Those 2 queries are the same, right? Is there a way to simplify them? Boolean algebra. Can you come up, it's almost like calculus. Can you come up with a shorter version of this? This is the same. Which is better? Whichever hits you first, I guess. They give you the right answer. That's the critical part. Check your answers. Make sure I didn't expect any union members, and before I put the parentheses in, I got union members, and that's not what I expected. Or I got non-union members, excuse me. So much for and or. Again, when you're mixing them, be very careful. You can just as simply or just as easily do this, but my feeling is that's not as easy to understand. Might help if I put them on the same line. They're not very long, so even on my big, huge text monitors with, I could still read it. That might help a little bit, but the or, to me, the word or reads a whole lot better. But it really doesn't matter. This is also acceptable. It's exact same thing. Order of precedence is still there. I don't recommend mixing and matching. That makes it even worse. One more example here. Let's do that one. Actually, you know what? You do it. Give me a list of females who work in Coloma, that's plant number 1, who are union members. All right, here's my answer. I'm going to select everything from TBL employees. Where the gender equals an F, we saw that. Single quotes, double quotes is up to you. And the plant ID equals 1, no quotes, that's an auto number field. And union member. You could say union member equals true, union member equals 1, I wouldn't do it. And there's the 2, and if I'm checking here, female, female, 1, 1, union members. If you see this, what I've done, and I'll show you this in a second, for all the homework assignments, for the next 2 sets of homework assignments, I show you the result sets. Here's what you should get. It has improved the accuracy of your homework, or at least of past students' homework immensely to know what the answer looks like. It doesn't tell you how to get there, it just tells you what the answer looks like. If this was real world, how would you know this is right? Well, one way you could do it is to list all of them sorted by gender and then filter out just the gender. So if I was testing this real world, let me show you what I would do. You don't have to follow here. Before I do, questions about that? This is what you're doing in the homework assignment. Give me a list of these. Okay. Now, if I was testing this, the first thing I would do is say, give me a list of all the employees, order by gender. And there's a bunch of F's. Okay, and it ends with Denise Hart and it starts with Diane Comstock. So if I filter, and I could maybe, I don't know if this tells me how many I have highlighted. I don't think I can even highlight a bunch. There we go. See anywhere where it tells me how many I'm highlighting? Doesn't look like it. Right click it, delete rows, copy rows. No, so it's not really helping me much here. But I can see that it starts with Comstock and it ends, the female list ends with Hart. So if I say where gender equals female, Hart, uh-oh, flipped them around on me. Oh no, it didn't. Yep. Flipped them around. But it looks like it's pretty good.
I think you'd have to order by gender and last name if you wanted.
I'd have to be a little more specific. And I should probably order them. That would be even better. Thank you. Order by gender and then employee ID. Let's do that. So I'm taking this back out again temporarily, going back to the first one. I'm doing a very good job. Again, how would I test it? And I messed up from TBL employees. Go. Okay. So now that I've got them sorted by ID, I can see that Hart is at the top and at the bottom, well, or another way to look at it is 1010101, and down here at the bottom I have 88888. So if I now say where gender equals F and I take out the order by gender, I should get 10101 down to 888. 10101 down to 888. So now I'm pretty confident that that worked. And now I just want to bring in the Coloma people. So I'm going to order by plant ID. This is just a test to prove that this is really working. After a while, you get so confident in MySQL that you don't bother with this. But here's my plant IDs. Didn't I say order by emp ID? Oops, plant ID's got to be first. One, two. And I'm looking for plant ID number 1, so there's only 2. At this point, there's only 2 left. Okay, and they're 222 and 505. So if I add the and, plant ID equals 1, I should see 2 of them, 222 and 505. And at this point, you might go, I'm done, I got 2. You got the right answer. That's just because there happens to be no female supervisors in Coloma. That's not the end of my question. And this is why I show you the result sets. It doesn't necessarily mean your answer is right. Because I have now one more criteria, and I could say order by union member. And if I run that, I get the same thing. I get the same answer. But if you really wanted to test it, that's kind of the process you'd have to go through. Show me all the females. And imagine a big, huge Amazon database, right? Show me all the females. Pfft, I didn't do much. Now filter that down by females in Wisconsin. Now filter that down. And you can build these in pieces and kind of watch it filter its way down. This is an interesting one. This says, give me a list of employees who work in Coloma and Polonia. It says there's 25 rows. Select from where the plant ID equals 1 and 2.
So they work in both plants?
Interesting question. Notice how many I got, not 25. All right, but as Kathy has already said, wait a minute, these people work in both plants? How can that be? How can I have multi-value fields in plant ID? I wouldn't. The design of this database, if we looked at the ERD, one employee works in one plant has many employees. But it's English is my point here. In English, we will often say, give me a list of the employees who work in Coloma and Polonia. Logically incorrect, unless somebody can work in 2 places at the same time. But often in English, will say it that way, meaning give me a combined list of 1 and 2. In English, we will say or, but you, programmer, database developer, need to know that's really an or clause to get all the 1s and 2s. So be careful. I need a list of the employees in plant 1 and 2. Use the word and. If you automatically say, I said and, I probably want to use and in my query, you'll get nothing in this case. So be careful with those kinds of things. Now, did I get my 25? I did. Another thing you can use, another operator for the where clause, is the in operator, also available in Access. The in operator allows you to provide a list, a comma-separated list of values like this, where the color is in red, white, or blue, with commas in between, surrounded by parentheses. So instead of saying this, I could say where the plant ID is in, and I'll pick different numbers, 1 and 3. Let's go with the 2 just to see we get the same answers. This comes in very handy when you want a list. So 1, 2, or 4, any of those is what that says. 1s, 2s, and 4s showing up. There's at least 3 different ways to ask this question, right? I could say where plant ID equals 1, or plant ID equals 2, or plant ID equals 4. By the way, this is not legal. Not legal, I hope. Notice there's some 3s in there. I'm surprised syntactically it's doing something. I don't know what. I'm pretty sure this 2 is treated as true. Yep, notice I got all 50 records. 2 is treated as true. In other words, there is a plant. True is always true, so every record gets included. 4 is always true. This is not syntactically correct. An equal sign here will probably really get it confused. Yep, there's my red X going, what the heck are you saying? Just like in all the programming languages, if you want to compare plant ID with 3 different numbers, you have to repeat everything. Plant ID equals 1, or plant ID equals 2, or plant ID equals 4. There's no shortcuts there. Very few languages allow you to take that shortcut. COBOL was one. Another way I could have done it, remember we did the in 1, 2, 4? Because I happen to know that there's only 3 plants or 4 plants, and 1, 2, and 4 include everybody but 3, I could put it that way. All of those are correct, unless the book says you must use an in operator. If the book says use an in operator, then use the in operator. Question? Just so you know, I think this is a bad idea. The word in to me implies a list. It should be one of these, 1, 2, 4. This works. But why would you just use equals 4? You should. It's probably faster. Not that we care much because this is taking so long. Equals is probably faster. This works, but again, I'd rather you not leave here with a mid-state stamp of approval on your forehead using in to check for one value. Use in to compare against at least 2 or more. If you've only got 1, just do an equals. Some people see that in and they use it as a solution for everything. If it's a single value, don't use in. I've warned you. Questions about in? All of these operators that we're learning about here are letting us filter our data. I only want to see this data. These are tools to get us there. Ands, ors, ins. Here's another very common one. Like. Now let me just look at my example here, see if there's anything we did that. Okay. Like. Sometimes we don't have a very clear specification. I want a list of anybody who lives in a town that has the word point in it for whatever reason. So we're going to give that town a discount on point root beer or whatever. For some reason, I want a list of trips that start with the letter C. It's amazing how often this happens. In our Programming Logic Intermediate class, we just built a search box, right, for our combo box. I know it was a whole week ago, so you probably forgot already. But we built a search box, didn't we? Not yet? Must be we're doing that today. Guess what we're going to do? Give me a list of all the records where the customer name is like whatever the user has typed in the search box. I have no clue what they've typed up there. Okay. Could be one letter, could be a G, my name would be on the list. Could be an AU, my name would be on the list. Could be an AUL, my name would be on the list. If it's AULLE, my name no longer shows up. Like allows us to say anything that looks like this. It's kind of like it contains, depending on how you use it. In order to use the like keyword, we also have to use a wildcard character. If you're not using the wildcard character, you should not be using the keyword like. The like comes with a wildcard character. Here's some examples. The wildcard character represents any set of characters before I go on here. Any set of characters. 20 characters, 1 character, no characters. The wildcard % can represent any number of characters. So in this example, where the name is like DAV wildcard, that means the name starts with DAV. If the name is David, Davidson, Dave. If the name is Dav, D-A-V, it matches because the wildcard can represent nothing as well. That is true across all wildcard characters. You can use them in Access, you can use them in programming. Anytime you're talking about a wildcard, the wildcard, this wildcard, the %, which often looks like a star in other languages. In MySQL, % represents any number of characters, including none. So this means starts with. This means ends with. Son. And by the way, these are usually case insensitive. So the fact that that's a capital D and this is a little s usually doesn't matter. Not in MySQL. This contains any number of characters at the beginning, like Anderson, David's son, Summer's son, and it also matches son, S-O-N. So this is ends with. Most common is contains the words or the letters S-O-N. Somewhere, anywhere. This is not just the middle. That's a very common misperception that this is S-O-N in the middle. That's not what that says. Because remember, the % could be nothing. If there's nothing at the beginning and there's an S-O-N, you match. If there's nothing at the end and there's an S, if it's just S-O-N, it matches that. So when you see % signs, the beginning and the end, that's a contains. Anywhere. Beginning and middle. It's very rare to see anything but these three. End, beginning, both sides. Beginning and end. Because everything else, if you put wildcards in 2 different places, it can cause all kinds of grief. These are the most common. Here, this says, starts with A, has anything in between and ends in S-O-N, like Anderson, right? This also matches ASON, because the % can be nothing. This happens occasionally, but normally we're not that specific. I want it to start with an A and end with an S-O-N, but if your boss asks you for a list of all the people, Amundsen and Andersons and Allisons, and yep, you can do it. This wildcard character represents any number of characters, including none. There is a second one that is much less used that represents, that's an underscore, that represents one and only one character. Not 0, not 2, 1. So if I do this like TM, and this should probably have quotes around it. Okay. This will match Tim and Tom, okay, but not Tom with a THOM. It'll also match a T2M. You don't have any flexibility to say it can just only be letters. There are other ways to do that. Always exactly 3 characters. If there was a space character in between there, that's okay. A dash, that's okay. TM, trademark? No. That one I rarely use. Just want you to know about it. So let's practice some likes here. We're supposed to find all the people or all the trips to a city that starts with C. So now we're changing tables. So first, just to get acclimated here, I'm going to show the entire trips table, because it's easy. Okay, so it is called destination. It's not called city. Very common mistake. You'll see in the homework assignment, give me a list of all the trips that went to the city of Dallas. And your first instinct, of course, is type city equals Dallas. Sorry, there's no city field. That's why this select star comes in so handy. Just give me a quick list. So what we want is to select, and I didn't say which field, so let's just go with star from TBL trips, where the destination is like I want to start with C. These are not case sensitive. Don't ask me how to make them case sensitive. You want to know that? Dig it up. There's a way to do it. I'm sure there is. It's beyond the scope of my course. But MySQL is a very powerful language. Let's make sure that works. Cleveland's and Chicago's. And looks like Cleveland and Chicago is about what we got here. And yes, you can add an order by clause. All the Chicagos are together and then the Clevelands. Next one says that contains the letter C. Contains is a percent sign on both. I don't think I have any cities that end in C, but here's the contains. Anything get added? Ah. Notice it doesn't matter where the C is. Here's one that ends in C. So there is a difference. And my notes, I think, make it pretty clear. Starts with, ends with, and contains. Those are the three you're most likely going to run into. To finish up with today, we can also use like to search for dates. I'm going to one more time do a select all from trips order by trip date. And some are zeros, and then we got February's. Looks like we got a bunch of February's here. Let's go back to the employees because I think the hire date's going to help me. Demonstrate what I want from TBL. Okay, here's the hire dates, 88s, 91s, whatever. What if I want the people who were hired in 1999? Be careful, Volker. Yes, there are some. Okay. We could do that between thing that we did before, where it's between 1/1/1999 and 1999/12/31. But using wildcards, we can shorten that a little bit, where the hire date is like, still a wildcard, 1999 star. Or not star, percent, sorry, wrong language. You'll find a star in Access, the wildcard character, star. So in programming logic, we're going to be using stars for wildcards instead of percent signs. As far as I know, MySQL is the only language that uses a percent sign as a wildcard for anything. Most of them use star. But I can use that to filter out my dates here. This says as long as the date starts with 1999, give it to me. I saw one, there's only one. Let's try 98. There we go. What if I wanted, notice there's 2 of them here in July of 97. Give me the people who were hired in July of 97 for some reason. Don't forget the dash. And so that can come in handy for dates. If for some goofy reason I wanted to know people who were hired on the 1st of any month in 97. There's my star again. Doesn't matter what the month is. Notice the dashes so things don't get confused. Probably wouldn't be bad to leave them out. Okay. But this says the 1st day of any month in 1997. Probably not going to get anything here. Yeah. But that like clause has a lot of power. You can use it on dates. You can use it on numbers. It's pretty rare. But you use it on decimal fields. Very powerful. Questions about it? If you're bored and you wish to carry on, most of you are still working on the create table stuff, but if you're bored, you can take a look at the assignment for single table queries. I'm not assigning it. You have a fair amount of skills here. You can list, you can sort, you can filter. What's left after like? Are like. Oh, let's not go there. Right. So that's what we'll pick up next time, but I don't think that one's even in the assignments. That one's just for my notes. Again, these are used more by me than by you sometimes. But you can get a warm up, and if you see something you don't understand, skip it. It's probably still coming. Or keep plugging away at what you're working on. All right, that's all for today.